So this will be available. Like my goal here basically is to like, don't worry about trying to like note every little thing, because there's probably gonna be stuff that it's just like minutia that you might miss. So this video will be available afterwards if you want to refer back to anything. And yeah, we are live streaming it, so like don't say anything that you wouldn't want out on a YouTube video or whatever. So before we get started, I want to give Chiara, she's here, the marketing director for Le Wagon, and yeah, just give you a minute to.
First of all, I'm very happy to see such a full room today of people with many diverse backgrounds and interests. My name is Chiara, I'm the marketing manager of Le Wagon. I know I've seen some familiar faces, some alumni of Le Wagon here, so some of you might already be aware of what we are. But basically, we are a coding school, so we teach courses in web development, data science. Now we are launching also data analytics. And we are exploring different topics besides coding. So that's why we started also partnering up with Nocode Lisboa, holding here the monthly meetups and trying to explore different speculative topics and bringing together different communities. What we do in our course, as I said, it's coding bootcamps on an intensive basis, either full-time or part-time. If you have any doubts or you just would like to know more about,
Just in case.
I'll be here around, and yeah, that's pretty much it.
Awesome. And yeah, Le Wagon is very awesome for letting us use this space. Did we lose the, oh no. Let's see. Hopefully we get the projector back. What just happened? There it is. So yeah, that we're super thankful for them letting us use this space. Sorry? Can I make it bigger? No, I can't. It's full screen. Okay, so what we're going to do, you guys, let me just give you kind of the quick backdrop for why I think this stuff is so powerful. So it sounds like we have representation. This is why I love Lisbon. It's like we have Belgium, Russia, Norway, US, like Spain, all these countries represented here. It's awesome to hear all these different backgrounds, some people who have some experience with Bubble, some with not. To me, what's so fantastic about this stuff, like, and why I started this meetup, is just because I think this is like the single biggest thing to democratize software development and to like bring it, make it accessible to people who aren't programmers. And to me, that is amazing because it means that we can like start building apps. We don't need to go to school and like hire engineers and like spend all this time. You can literally just dive in and start building apps. And that just like people with very like weird domain expertise that might never otherwise build an app are going to have the super like interesting domain knowledge to then make a really powerful app. So I think that's why this stuff's so powerful. I guess this one struck a nerve. Like the GPT stuff is mind-blowing, as you'll see right now. So I think the combination of these two technologies is like peanut butter and chocolate. It's just bananas what you can do with this stuff. So this is going to be the syllabus tonight. What we're going to try to get done in the course of the hour is go from literally zero. I have nothing. I'm going to create the app now, and you're going to see everything is a blank slate. And we're just going to walk through each of these steps. I will try to remember to highlight where we're at so you guys know where we are. And then this link I will publish on the meetup as a comment, so you can refer back to it. It's got all the links to different tools and whatnot. And yeah, with that, I'm going to kill the light in the back just so it's a little easier to see. Hopefully that's a little better. And yeah, let's get going. Okay, so first thing we're going to do, like I said, there's a brand new blank slate here. Let me share my screen for the Zoom. Oops, am I broadcasting right now? Audio, let's see, share screen. Okay. So first thing we need to do is create a new app in Bubble here. So you just go to Bubble. You can see I've got one app here. This is my main thing right now. So I'm going to create a new blank app. We'll just call it GPT demo. It's already taken. Demo 2. There we go. And this is setting up the app in the background. Okay, so we don't need to do, we're just going to skip the setup assistant, skip this thing, and just build this stuff from scratch. So the very first thing we need to do is now we're going to be using the GPT-3 API. And so I'm going to show you. They've got some example apps, and I thought the best way to demonstrate this stuff is literally just to use one of their example apps, and we'll invoke it from within Bubble just to show how the API works, and then we'll like basically make it dynamic and we'll parameterize it. We'll send in things dynamically so you can see how that works. So I want to point out that there's a guy who did an awesome tutorial. I'm basically just extending what he did. I've linked it here at the bottom. So we're basically going to do what he did, but then we're going to take it a step further and make it dynamic. We're going to make it so the results can be saved to the database. Sorry? It's off. Flux is off. Yeah, it might be night shift. I'm not sure if there's an easy way to turn that off. But yeah, hopefully this is good enough. Okay. So yeah, so first thing we need to do, let's take a look at the example apps. So this is the page, it's linked in there. A bunch of examples here, you can go and play with this stuff. We're going to use this one, the very last one, it's called interview questions. And so the idea here, you can read it, this is the prompt. So ChatGPT, just to kind of take a full step backwards, this is a large language model that was trained on like all this content, and you can basically ask it natural language questions. And so this is, we're now going to look at how to invoke that through the API. And so here's an example of a prompt that you give it: create a list of 8 questions for my interview with a science fiction author. And then this is what it returns: 8 questions, right? So what we're going to try to do right now is actually pull this off. Instead of doing it from like the ChatGPT interface where you have like the web browser and you type it in and then it gives you the answer, we're going to do that from the Bubble app, right? So what we need to do next is to set up Bubble's API connector. And so this is something that comes with standard even in the free Bubble account. You can go in here to plugins and you can say add plugin. And it's that very first thing that pops up, API connector. So I'm going to install that. And here it is. Okay. So we are now on this step. Okay. So to set this up, I'm going to first walk through this manually, and I'm going to do it the hard way. And then I'm going to show you this super simple shortcut. But I want you to like get kind of the basics of what we're doing first. So to set this up, we go in here and we add an API, and we're going to call this GPT-3 and just leave authentication blank for now. And we're going to add an API call. So let's take a look at this now. So in pretty much every API that you look at, a REST API is going to typically have documentation that comes with it. And like, look at any API, like any of the major ones you can think of, Facebook and Twitter and Stripe and all these APIs. If you look, you'll find the documentation. And at some point, they'll give you something that shows you code examples. And so what we're going to do, we're looking at the curl. And this is basically a command line URL. So this is basically telling you what the parameters are that you send to the API. And so let's just kind of take this apart here. And it's saying, this is the endpoint. So you're hitting this URL and you're sending, this H means it's a header parameter. So this is one header. This is another header. And these have to do with like authorization is how you authenticate. It's like you have to give it your API key so it knows who you are. Content type JSON is just what we're going to be sending it. And then this D means data. And so this block of stuff is a JSON object. Now I'm going to open, this is one of the tools that's linked in that thing. This is a JSON, it's aptly named JSON visual, but it's a visualizer that allows you to paste in JSON and it'll give you a nice tabular, like visual way to look at it. And it's just way easier to make sense of stuff. So we'll use this throughout to try and better visualize what we're doing here. Okay, so So we got to start with sending it, telling it what the endpoint is. So let's grab this out of the curl. We're going to give that to Bubble, and we're going to say, use this endpoint. It's going to be the request type is going to be post. Don't worry about like the difference yet, but just know that typically anytime you're sending data to an endpoint, it's going to be a post. There are some cases where it can be a get, but like you're pretty much safe to just do it as post and do like try it out first, and it's probably going to work. Okay, so we're sending JSON data, leave that alone, and that's the endpoint. And now what we need to do is tell it who we are. So we're going to add a header here, and we're going to say, we're stealing these headers from the curl thing. So content type, application JSON. So I'm just going to we're going to add another one, which is the authorization. And then you see it says bear OpenAI API key. So we are going to have to basically, we need to go create an API key. So let me go do that real quick. You do that in here. You just go up to API keys, and I need to create a new one. So here is that key. For the people watching this later, this will be disabled, so don't try to like use the API key. But we're going to put that in here, and I'm going to store it in the notepad just because we're going to use it later as well. And we need that to say actually bearer. Because the format, actually, it isn't just the API, it's bearer API. Okay, and they can be private, that's fine. All right, so we've got the authentication part of this down. So now all we need to do is add the actual JSON. Okay, oh, and we're here now, by the way. Okay, so let's grab this sample block of JSON, and this is exactly what is up here. It's just sending this prompt. So this is the object we need to send that has all the parameters it's expecting for the prompt. So we're going to paste that in here. And now we should, I think, have everything we need. So let's just try it out and see if this works. Okay, so this is what it returned. And you can see if we go down here to show raw data, that it's come back with our question or our interview questions here. Right? So I don't know if you guys can read that. But yeah, those are all the questions. All right, so far so good. We've got it now initialized, and Bubble can talk to the API. So we're going to save it. And yeah, so any questions so far? Cool. Yeah, and again, like there's some minutia here. Refer back to the video in terms of how to set it up if you're going to try to do this on your own. Okay, now what I'm going to do is actually just completely delete what we just did. And show you the easy way to do this. So I'm going to delete that API call that we just made. And we're going to import another call from curl. And then this is what the cheat code is here, you guys. You can just go into this thing, copy this curl code. And Bubble can figure all that out just by pasting it in there once. So we just save a bunch of energy by doing that. But we do need to put our API key back in there. That's why I kept it in the notepad. And rename it. And you have to initialize it again. Okay. So there it is. And we are done with that. So we've actually done all three of these things, showed you the tool, the cheat code. And so now we are building the mini app in Bubble. So let's go back and we're going to go to our design canvas here. I don't know how to hide this thing. Let's see. There's a way to get rid of this. There we go. Okay, so let's try to display the response here that we get from the API. Let's just do it statically. Let's not try to make it dynamic yet, but let's give a what's called a repeating group. This is a group of list, like items in a list, and we're going to display the data type is going to be text. The data source is going to be the API call that we just made. And, oh, okay, so I want to change one thing here. We need to make some parameters though. So let me go back. Okay, so in Bubble, what you can do is you can actually turn these into parameters just by saying, using like the greater than, less than symbol. So I'm going to say number of questions. And that becomes a parameter now. And we want it to be public. So we'll check that. And then we're going to change this profession and we're just going to call it profession. And same thing, we'll make it public. And we're going to default it to, let's say 5 and librarian. And I'm actually going to pull these headers into what's called a shared header, because as we add, if we start adding multiple API calls, we don't want to have to repeat, like put in our key every time. What if it changes, then we have to go back and change it in a bunch of places. So I'm actually going to delete these and I'm going to move them up to a shared header. So let's make these up here. And the key again is authorization. It's that. And then content type. And it's application JSON. Okay, so let's reinitialize the call. Check to make sure it still works. Here it is. Let's just inspect the raw data. There we go. And you can see that it's pulled librarian. I guess librarianship is a word. So, okay, so good. So it works. Let's save it. And now when we go back to the canvas and we look at this API call here, you can see that it's got the public parameters that we just exposed and they default to the 5 and librarian there. Okay, so far so good. Close that out. And what we're going to do is let's look at that that API request so you can see what it returned again. So I'm just going to actually reinitialize it. And then let's inspect that raw data. Yeah. And I'm going to grab this JSON object. I'm going to put that into the visualizer so you guys can see what this actually looks like here. And I know that text is really small, but here's the key right here. It's the choices block. It's got a text section in that, and all the answers are there. So GPT just returns text. It doesn't like give you a structured JSON object with all the right elements, like an array of elements. It just gives you a text blob. So what that means is in Bubble, we're just going to have to make sure that we parse through that text blob and like separate that out into elements. Good news is Bubble makes that pretty easy to do. So, okay, so that's what's returning here. And if we were to publish this right now, like, so we're looking for the choices and we want the, because it's just basically returning one item with all this stuff stuffed into one blob. We're going to grab the first item of that list, text. And let me just show you if we do this now. So this thing is looking for a list of things. So we have to take that text blob and turn it into a list. So what Bubble does is it has this neat function called split by. So we can take that text, do split by, and then what we're looking at is, you can't see it here, but it's in that raw code that we pasted. There's this line delimiter called like /n means a new line. And that's the one thing here that you just kind of have to know. Like, yeah, I guess you Google that to figure out what that is. But knowing that that is the delimiter, you just add that new line here in the text separator. And that should give us what we want. So I'm going to take off the fixed number of rows. And at this point, we should have the data coming to our repeating group for display. So let's just add in a text element so we can express it. And we're going to say, show us the current cell's text. And fingers crossed, this should work. I know there's one problem with it, but I'll show you, we'll correct that here in a second. So preview it. And if any luck, this should give us okay, and you can see here's our 5 responses, but it has 2 blank lines, like basically 2 blank elements. And if you were to go back and look at the raw JSON, you'd see that there are actually 2 line delimiters with nothing. So that makes sense. So all we need to do to correct that issue is actually to go back in here to the repeating group and then append here on the split by, append a little thing called items from. And so we'll just do from item 3 on. And that will solve that issue. So let it churn again here, and we should have, indeed, there it is, right? So we have now the 5 responses coming from the API call to ChatGPT displaying in Bubble, right? Bueno. Okay, so any questions thus far? I know that there's some technical details. Again, refer to the video to figure that stuff out if you need help. But conceptually, do you guys understand what we're doing so far? Cool. Okay, so now let's get fancier. We're now here. So we just successfully parsed the response object and populated a repeating group. So now what we're going to do is parameterize that call. So it's not going to be a static API call anymore. We're actually going to send it parameters, and we're going to get to pick some wacky professions and see what it comes back with. So let's do that next. Okay, so how do we do that? What do we need in order to do that on this page? There you go, input. So let's add, and we're going to do 2 inputs. We're going to do one that is called how many questions? And this is going to be of type integer, and it can't be blank. And then we're going to do another one called, this is going to be profession, or which profession. Oops. And it's going to be type text, likewise can't be empty. And then we need a submit button. And we'll say retrieve questions. Yep. Yep.
Usually when we're kind of like when you're making a code for like a form like this, sometimes I think you can also do it without a submit button as like an enter or something like that. Can you do that with Bubble?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, good question. So Bubble has this concept of workflows that we're going to see right now, and anything can trigger a workflow. So you could say when the field reaches, when the field is defocused or reaches a certain character number or whatever, like you can set whatever parameters you want that then trigger that workflow, and the workflow can initiate the form send. So yeah, I'm doing it. Everyone's pretty familiar with the button interaction model, and now I'm also going to make it so we can get multiple rounds. So okay, so we got the button, we got the 2 inputs. We now need to make this button basically refresh the group. And so I'm actually going to hide this group by default. The way I'm going to do this is let's say it's not visible on page load, and that this button will basically trigger a workflow that makes it visible. So show element, and we're going to show that repeating group there. And the other thing that we need to do is change the data source. So make sure that it sends those dynamic parameters that we just made. So the way you do that in Bubble is it's got this little blue dynamic data. Let's change that to how many questions, the value, and then we're going to change this one to the other text field, which is which profession and its value. Okay. And now if this works, and what I'm also going to do is go back into the API connector, and I'm going to set these to null so it doesn't actually default to anything. And okay, so this in theory should work. Let's try it. And you guys notice like what's kind of cool about Bubble is you don't have to click preview every time. You just go back here to the page that's open and hit on that top bar. It knows when the page has changed. And so it just makes it super fast for development. But okay, so how many questions do we want to get back?
99.
How many?
99.
99. No, we're going to be here all night. Let's do 6. And what profession? Anyone? Carpenter. All right. Oh, what do we do here? Oh, so we need to basically hide it. Yeah, we need to basically have it. So you saw it displayed the API call from the null data. So basically we need to put something in the interface that would wait until it populates with responses. But here you go. You can see it got it in the background. What inspired you to become a carpenter? What do you find most rewarding about your job? Challenges. Okay, so this is illustrating that ChatGPT knows what a carpenter is. So what safety precautions do you take when working with blah, blah, blah? These are right now as fixed. So I need to actually make these. I can make them just bigger, or we can change them to the what's it called? The responsive UI. Let's do that again. Carpenter. Oh, this is the other thing, is just that this ChatGPT, I think they said they hit 5 million users, or no, sorry, they hit 1 million users in 5 days, which is unheard of in terms of a new product. And so it's API, if anyone's been playing with it, like there'll just be times when it just doesn't work because it's so slammed, and so they throttle. But here we go though, we got our 6 carpenter questions, and you can read them. Yeah, what's your experience working with different types of wood? So you can see that these are actual questions. These aren't just like, how do you get into carpentry? What do you like about carpentry? You know, it's like actual contextual questions that make sense for carpentry, which is cool. No worries. Okay, so that's good news, is we've got it working. We've got it invoking the API with dynamic elements. So yeah, so I'd say that's a pretty big win. We did that in 30 minutes from 0 to that point. So we're now also going to take it a step further, and I'm going to show you how to then save this data to the database. And this is where, like, I want you to get to like the wheels to start turning. Like, think about what you can do as you chain API calls together and use calls that then use the results of other calls to do stuff. Because this is where we get into like some pretty incredible possibilities here. But I'm just going to show you how we do that. We basically need to create a data table. We're going to create one called, let's just call it interviews. And we need a field called profession of type text. And let's do a field called questions. And it's going to be type text, and it's going to be multiple entries. So it's going to be a list of text. And like from a pure data model perspective, this isn't the best way to do this. Like I'm more of a purist, so I will like actually do normalized, like split tables out and do relations and whatnot. But just for the purposes of a demo, this is the quickest thing to demonstrate, but it will work. So okay, so now we need, let's just add another button, and we'll call this one save to DB. And yeah, and so this one, what we'll do with it, we'll invoke a workflow that creates a new thing of type interviews. And we're going to set the field profession equal to, let's see, which profession value. And we'll set the questions equal to, we're going to add the list that we just returned in the repeating group. List of texts. Okay. So to show you, there's no data in the database right now. There's 0 rows there. Let's run this sucker. And anyone want to make another profession? Golfer, maybe? Okay, what motivated you to, all right, so these are all pretty generic. There's nothing golf specific in that one, but it doesn't matter. So, all right, so now let's save it to the database with that button. And it probably makes sense to actually, let's just put a hidden message here, like, and we'll say successfully saved. Whatever, I mean, we won't worry about how it looks, but we're going to hide it to start. And then as a part of that workflow that we made, when it saves that thing to the database, let's then have it do show element, and let's show that text. So we actually have some feedback in the app when it's succeeded. But as you can see in the data, I'll just show you that that element is there, but let's do another one just to prove success measure. Yeah, go ahead.
When you have one order after the other one, for example, like when you click the button say database, it creates database. But what if for some reason Google didn't manage to save it to the database? Would it still show successfully saved to the database, or would it just not go to the next?
So if you have something to detect, like Bubble will just do what it can. If it errors out, then unless you have a method of displaying an error, you won't be any wiser. And so it's up to you to build the.
If, for example, if something fails, if Bubble just goes straight to the next action, or it just
Okay.
stops there.
Great question. So I don't know if you can see this, these controls for the Zoom. Down here, you guys can see this inspect. So what this is super useful. This is the debugger in Bubble. And this allows you to see, like, as things are running, you can inspect certain blocks. You can inspect like the repeating group and see sorry, I'm gonna move these guys over here. You can see basically the content of this stuff and the states and all this debug information. And you can also, here, I'll just do it. But we can set it to step by step. And then you can see that it's going to actually intercept the actions, and it's going to let you step through them one at a time. And you can, like, this is really useful to get like these debug breakpoints and see what's the status of something before this workflow runs and after it runs. And so it's super useful for that. On your production app, obviously, it's not going to have those controls. You only have this on development, but it's very useful. Okay. Cool. And then, yeah, just to confirm and show that this works, you can see that there's the 2 rows in the database there. And if we wanted to add a third, let's say policeman. Cool. So far, so good. Any questions? Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe if you alter the query or something to include like provide me some original questions or unusual questions, maybe like scandalous questions that make it.
Love it. Let's do it. Let's do it. I'm all for it. Okay, so that query, where does it exist? I'm going to quiz you on this. Where would I change that prompt, basically? Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but so this is where that prompt exists right now. So we might say, create a list of questions for my interview with a profession. Let's say wacky and scandalous questions. And we do have to reinitialize it. Otherwise, Bubble is going to be working with a cache copy of the API. So when we do that, here we go, save it, and then go back here. And yeah, we should be good. We reload this page. And what do we want to have scandalous questions about? Lawyer, I think. Okay, I mean, these aren't like scandalous, I would say, but they are a little, okay, well, what is the most outrageous thing a client has ever asked you to do? So GPT is trying to be interesting, you know, but maybe it's like the toned down, non-risque version of GPT. But you get the point, like that changes to the prompt will incorporate and it's, yeah, it's, yeah, you can see the tone of the questions change. Yeah.
Sorry that I'm asking so many questions, but could you, for example, where you put wacky and scandalous, could you change that to an input and then have an input that gives you, for example, a list of different types of questions that you could get review and get
yeah, exactly. So you guys think about this. This is kind of where I want your wheels to start turning. Like where my mind went on this stuff is like, how do we make some money with this? Like, what is the product that could be created here immediately? And I think probably within half day, we could create a little app that says ChatGPT, like let's just ask it. I'm going to use the web interface because it's just the easiest way to ask it questions. But let's say like ChatGPT, what are the top 20 professions or top 20 professions by interest? What are the top 20 professions by interest? Okay, it likes to like CYA, it likes to basically never be wrong. So it will give you some long-winded answer. Let's say, what are the top 10 jobs of, I don't know, blue collar workers?
How often do you find faults in answers?
Sorry?
How often do you find faults in answers? But the doesn't make sense. It's like it's constant brand new that something that's not really true, but it does it.
Yeah, so there's different parameters you can send. I'm not like what's called a prompt engineer. Believe it or not, there's like already a profession emerging around this stuff because it takes some artistry to like prompt it right. But they have these parameters you can send with it. If you notice in the they send it in the API connector, you can see temperature, this frequency penalty. So there's ways of like shaping the response a little bit. Like temperature, I think, has to do with like how spicy you want it to be, which maybe we should just set that to like max spiciness. But anyways, but yeah, so you can shape the responses you get back with some of these parameters. I have not done it enough to really know the boundaries really well, but like you saw here it just came back with like construction worker, electrician, plumber, welder, mechanic, carpenter, blah, blah, blah. So it just gave us a list of 10 jobs. I was thinking like, it'd be very trivial to say, ChatGPT, go look up the top 1,000 jobs by, number of job seekers, store that in the database, then write a process that goes and hits every one of those and say, give me the top 20 most commonly asked job interview questions for these positions. Then we make an app that gives like the first 5 away for free and then paywall the next 15. And we can even have it write like, how do I best prepare for this question as one of the prompts, right? So it's like we can build this whole like custom tailored solution to job seekers, and then we SEO the heck out of it. So it basically say like, every one of these pages is indexable, minus the ones behind the paywall. But like, you get the point, like it's very trivial to start building some really powerful applications. And you can do that, you put that together in like a few hours, right? Yeah.
Does the API keep the context of the prompts that we send in?
So this is an excellent question. So what ChatGPT did was it allowed you to basically keep state, and you could go and ask it clarifying questions. So if we said on here, it says like, I don't know, what's a question we could refine this? Like, are there specific versions of these professions, more specific versions of these professions, right? So it remembers that it was blue collar, and so it will give you like a more granular like subcategories of those professions. So the answer is yes. In ChatGPT, as long as you maintain, I forget how it knows like the socket connection or something, but it will, in this case, if we continue to like invoke it from the same API, like IP, or I don't know how they're maintaining or how they know it's still the same session. But yes, it does. That answer your question? Okay, but yeah, but that was just an idea like of an app you could build very quickly and probably make some money with it, right? So there's endless ideas like that. It's limited by creativity at this point, and yeah, hopefully this was as mind-blowing to you guys as it was to me. So I think this is a good pause point. I haven't been updating this, but basically, yeah, we just committed the results to the database table. We talked about how chaining results together, you can build pretty sophisticated apps. This is pretty good breakpoint. Does anything else you want to cover on this topic? Because I'm going to show you next basically some independent standalone tools that can be useful in the debugging if we want to get into that, or I can show you this other this extension for Google Sheets that's also bananas. Yeah.
For chaining these APIs together, would that always need third-party safer on Paragraph? This Bubble for itself can handle, I don't know, the chaining fast.
Yeah, so the way you would do it in Bubble is it has this concept of scheduled workflows. And so you can like create a process that runs, hits the API, pulls those things down to the database, and then you create what's called a recursive workflow that will then iterate through each record in the database and do something to it. And you can do, yeah, like the entries that we made in here in the database. You could write then a process that would come back here. You can't do this in the free plan, which this is using right now, but in the paid plan, it has this concept of what's called backend workflows. Yeah, I can show you in my app because I actually pay for mine, but that allows you to schedule things, and it's the equivalent of like a cron job. So you can set up a cron task that will hit it repeatedly. And then the way to do, like to iterate through rows of something or lists of stuff is using this thing called a recursive workflow. So you invoke it and basically like do something to the list, the stack, and then knock one off the stack, and then basically give it itself, call itself again, and then process the list until there's 0 elements left, and then it finishes. Yeah, good question. Okay, well, if there's no other questions, I figured I'd show you the other 2 tools that I think are worth looking at. These are just like like Bubble has great, like that thing where we can just import the curl code and it makes all the parameters, like that's super handy. But if you happen to be not using Bubble, or if we want to take Bubble out of the equation, let's say there's something going wrong and we need to like troubleshoot it. These are like standalone tools that you should know about. And they're basically, there's two of them because we're debugging the sending and the receiving of API requests. And so if you think about like Bubble's over here, ChatGPT is over here, it's sending an API request, retrieving stuff, and then ChatGPT is giving a response back. So we can emulate that send. We can pretend we're Bubble basically, and hit that the ChatGPT API without using Bubble. And we use Postman to do that. And if we're going the other direction and we're expecting something, so let's say we're Bubble and we want to know, we want to not hit ChatGPT. Let's say it's down or whatever, or it's doing something that we don't expect and we want to see what we're actually sending it. Then that's when we use this thing called pipe dream. And I'm sure there's other tools out there. These ones are free and they're the best ones that I found. So let me just quickly show you each of these, what they are. They're linked in this doc if you want to download them. But let's look at, first let's look at pipe dream actually. So the way we do this is we can set up, you can think of this like setting up a dummy endpoint that we're going to hit, and it's going to show us exactly what it got. And so this is just really useful for debugging. So let's set up a new request bin, it's called, and it's going to be HTTP request full HTTP. I think that's all good. And let's see. Okay, and then so we're going to take this and we're just going to substitute it. We're going to go back in here and we're just going to basically change the endpoint. So it's no longer hitting ChatGPT. We're going to hit this thing. And we, again, have to reinitialize it. But you'll see when we do this, oops. Oh, because it's now expecting a response and it's not getting one. Let's see. Data type. I'm just going to say empty for this. I think that's what it's complaining about. Initialize. So it should get this. Here we go. New events. It got 2 events. Okay, so it hit it twice. Basically, Bubble wasn't happy because it was expecting a JSON response back. And this thing apparently doesn't return a JSON response. That's why it was complaining. But you can see here that this shows you what we got, and it's got the prompt. There's our list of wacky, scandalous questions for my interview with Null, because we left those blank, remember? So this is just, it's showing you literally everything it got, and like the headers and everything. Like this is all the stuff. Super useful error logging information when you get into weeds. If you do really sophisticated stuff, like these tools are indispensable for like trying to figure out, you know, what is that actually sending? How do we intercept that in transit? Look at the payload and like get to the bottom of this. So this is on the receive side of it. To show you how it works on the send side of it, we use this other thing called Postman. And that's this one. And so, yeah, we basically set this up just kind of the same way that we set up the other one. And so let's just do that real quick. And we got to send it those headers. Oops. Wrong thing. Okay, so send it. Headers, we're going to send it authorization, and it's kind of got that pre-filled nice thing where we don't have to type everything out. Content type, application JSON. And we're going to send it this body of stuff. Send it raw JSON, paste this in there. Okay, and it's type post. And we'll use that original endpoint so you can see what we get back from the ChatGPT API when we do this. Oops, keep opening. Okay, so knock on wood, this should and there's the response. And I'm gonna, again, put this in the visualizer so you can see it a little better here. Okay, and so you can see there is basically the same thing that we got back in Bubble, same response. Right, but in this case, we've basically gotten rid of Bubble. We just pulled Bubble out of the equation entirely, and we're just using Postman. Okay. All right. So if there's no questions on these tools, I just bring them up because it's kind of like I like to learn like the fundamentals and like show me the stuff that I need to know about, like to figure stuff out. The last thing I want to show you guys is another just crazy awesome thing that I found. So this is like the duct tape of ChatGPT, like being able to invoke it from Google Sheets is super useful just to get scrappy if you need to do something quick or you want to prototype an app like this without even getting into Bubble. So let's look at how to do this. And the example that I figured I would show you is let's just take, I don't know, I'm going to make some people up. Ben and Fred and Joan. And how did we meet Ben? Again, I'm just making this up as a way, like a way to show you how cool the prompting stuff is. But meeting circumstance, so I'm going to say met on New Year's Eve at a party in Sintra. We talked about investments and he gave me some good advice. And I'm going to say Fred on what, 1:15 in Salbento. And he helped me fix my flat tire. And Joan, I'm going to say on Christmas in Phoenix. And she, and we talked about climate change. She had some good ideas for projects that could help. Okay, so I'm just giving it some context of how I met these people. If you guys like track, you know, meetings and people you want to stay in touch with, you just literally like log stuff in a sheet like this. But now watch this. This is what's super powerful, is we can invoke this thing. You install this thing called Sheet AI, which is this sheetai.app, and we can invoke it any prompt here from within here. So I'm going to say, I am writing follow-up emails to people I met recently. Let's say, please write a 5-sentence email to, and then let's say column A, given that we met under these circumstances. And column B. Okay. And I'm going to say use an informal tone and express eagerness to meet again. So I'm not suggesting that you write all your follow-up emails this way because it's kind of cheating and informal, but like this is just to show you kind of what's possible here. Oop, what happened? Oh, there we go. All right, and let's so did one, let's just drag it down and it'll do the others. And now read these emails. I'm gonna blow it up so you can see it. If I can make that bigger, there we go. So just like, it's pretty incredible. I don't know if you guys can read those. I'll read them out for the people in the back. Happy New Year. I hope you had a great time at the party in Sintra. I want to thank you again for the great advice you gave me about investments. I really appreciate it. I would love to meet up again, continue our conversation. I think it'd be really helpful to hear more of your insights. Maybe we could grab a coffee sometime this week and chat. So now imagine sprinkling in here in that prompt. If I want to say, I'm trying to drive these people to actually sign up to my newsletter. So I'm writing follow-up emails to people I met recently and encouraging them to sign up for my newsletter to stay in touch. They can do so at my blog, my about page. So now let's make that modification. And this is literally, it's just like this lead funnel, basically, that you're automating by doing this. So it rewrites the email. And it says, if you'd like to stay in touch, you can sign up, blah, blah, blah. So you can get an idea, like you can just do this for, input 1,000 contacts that you just met, how you met them, real quick context, and it writes 1,000 emails, and you're now driving some of those people to join your newsletter. Yeah.
You use training English players. Can you go through every email you sent the last 5 years to learn how you write emails that you sent?
So don't quote me on this, but I know for sure you can train. It has the ability. Let's see. The answer is yes. You can train. Can you train ChatGPT on custom data set? The answer is yes. I've found this. Center. Hold on. I know for sure you can. There's some way of invoking the API and sending it like a body of text to train it on. I'll post it. I'll update that note with it at the bottom because I don't remember offhand how you do it. But yes, there's definitely a way to do that. Oh, actually, yeah, I have the link somewhere, so I'll add it to that.
And this where this is happening. Everyone's going to say that, but we need personalized training data. If I'm taking on all real estate data, at least 10 years somewhere.
Yeah.
And training all of that, then that would be monetized, right?
Sorry, say the last part again.
Then that could be monetized. So if you have data that not everyone else has,
Right.
That's
Exactly. Yeah, the value, just so as these things emerge, you know for sure that like Google's working on it and Amazon's probably working on its equivalent, and everyone's gonna, at some point, these will be commodities and they'll converge on the same stuff because they're all trained on the internet. So that what he's saying is that then really the alpha here is in these like siloed data sets that don't exist publicly, that you exclusively have access to. And you're absolutely right. I'm also semi-terrified of like training, like giving it access to all my email and having OpenAI just like read all my email. That seems kind of weird, but I guess Google already has it right now. So yeah. It's literally going to be like have your AI talk to my AI and like set up lunch sometime this week, right? Like it's crazy. So anyways, you guys, like the sky's the limit with this stuff, as you can see, like we're limited literally by the creativity of the prompts. So now I'm very much interested in like prompt engineering and like what goes into that and how do you like get sophisticated. But like to me, learning prompt engineering is kind of like the way back in the day, like learning Boolean searches and like constraining by file type and like some of these kind of like power user Google techniques, like that gave you some superpowers. I think like prompt engineering, being good at that is kind of like the next frontier here. So anyways, any other questions before we wrap? This is really all I have at this point. Yep.
Is there any way, for example, imagine that you're creating a site or a website on level, but at a certain point, you don't really want to be using Bubble anymore. Is there a way to turn the website that Bubble created into actual code? And be able to bring that code after, like for example?
Not with Bubble. So yes, so Flutterflow apparently does it. There's also another one called Didify, I believe. AppGyver is another no code thing that's open source. So
Sometimes it takes quite a bit of time to like actually have your, for example, the front end of an application types. You are, it takes a lot of time to do it. So if there was like a tool that you can already make the content like way easier, and then if you want to input other functionalities with actual code, this.
well, you can call within Bubble, you can like invoke, like it has this rich component library. So like things that you can't do natively in Bubble, there's someone's likely already built a component, but you can also like call JavaScript. Like I embed a JavaScript snippet on our site. So like I have a discourse server for our forums, and on the pages of the projects, I'll actually just, well, actually, do you guys want to see in Bubble? Yeah, within Bubble. If you guys are up for it, like, do you guys have time for one more thing for me to show you? Just stick around for a second. Check this out. Like, so I just literally released this yesterday. This is my main thing at this point. It's an initiative that I started called Programmatic. The idea here is that I think we can solve like massive problems. I think we have all the people and resources we need to solve like pretty much every major world problem, and it's kind of just a coordination issue at this point. So this is the platform that I created to try and start to chip away at that. I just put out the largest feature release that I've done to date. It's 2 months worth of work, but I basically built an entire trading platform in Bubble. And my vision here is that I think by like we do these events, they're almost like startup weekends. The last one we did was in December. And what we did on the last one was gamify it with poker chips and paper capitalization tables. And so we basically made like this little mini startup ecosystem in the room where, you know, we go through this sequence, people ideate, pitch projects, form into teams. And then now that we have these teams, they're almost like little mini startups. And so I brought subject matter experts to the event and then gave people poker chips that they could then buy services from these subject matter experts. And it created this really cool, like a mini startup ecosystem in that room. So what I've since done is basically take that same game mechanics and I turned it into the application, and I baked all that in here. And so if you wanted to see like, I'll just show you real quick what's possible. So anyone today can now come here and nominate a project. Oops, I don't know how to get rid of this sucker. Anyone can nominate a project. Oops, what's going on? And I have one that I still have to add, so this is perfect. So Esperanza is a group that we worked with in Barcelona, and hunger and homelessness. So I've coded all these problems. I've coded them against the SDGs, the United Nations framework. And let's just go through the process. And this is literally anyone can nominate one of these. So got this here. So this is just like a blurb, a description, the roles that it needs right now. Basically need a project manager and a minute. So you can like link to an existing YouTube video, or you can skip it, or you can actually even record a video right from within the browser. And this is again, one of those plugins in Bubble that makes it really, it's crazy. So yeah, so like test, check 1, 2, 3. This is a test recording of the pitch. And this last thing is what I added. We're now, is there a bounty for this project? I'm going to say no on the root node and just submit it. And I'll show you though. So then on the back end, what it looks like change this to defaults to dev. Let's go to live. Yeah, so this is my app. And if we look at the projects data, you'll see what we just submitted there. This is it. So you can see the video that we just recorded. Like test, check 1, 2, 3. This is so this is all here. So all I would have to do, I'm gonna Esperanza. And obviously I'm cheating, I'm using a backend, but at some point I write tooling to then expose this so that this too can be, I can have other people doing this. But let's go ahead and approve it. And what happens when I approve it is it does a number of things. And this is where I can show you what the backend workflows look like. So behind the scenes, it's gone out and it's done all of this. Let me show you. So this is backend workflows are not initiated by the front. They're things that get triggered based on conditions. And so this whole sequence of events, I created an entity user for basically the company, the project I just created, and I made a wallet, funded the wallet, does all this stuff, creates a login link, notifies the owner. And so basically it's like you can automate all this stuff. But the net result of all this is now this project, Esperanza project, is now live here in the gallery. And what's cool about it is it's now got a cap table with the user. Oops, let's see. I'm not sure, maybe it hasn't finished creating that one. I'll show you a different one. But basically, like, these things now have the ability to do bounties. And so like here you can see there's a cap table. This one has like every project can have infinite number of subtasks. So it's like this recursion where you can basically do nesting. And you can see this one has a bounty on it. And so if I were to say like claim this bounty, I can basically upload an asset that satisfies the bounty. I'm proposing a trade, and then the owner of the project can accept the trade. So we're basically recreating those game mechanics that I mentioned, only now it's completely in software. And so this can be done with remote asynchronous. We can use it at the event. I can create like an admin to make people bring this to their city and throw the event. So there's just a lot of possibilities, but this is all done in Bubble. So cool. Awesome. All right, well, thanks for sticking around. We did that in basically an hour, and hopefully you guys found it useful. So yeah, cheers.